Welcome to another episode of The Royal Corner. Thank you so much for making the time to watch this episode today. I'm extremely delighted and excited to announce who I've got as a guest today. This is a woman that many of us have grown up watching on TV, and we've seen her grow over the years into becoming even more well entrenched in the media and entertainment industry. Please join me as I welcome Salamina Mosese to the Royal Corner. Salamina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's
Yes.
an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's such a pleasure for me. Like I said, I grew up watching you, Soul Buddyz, your career. It's been so beautiful and you look so good. You look so good. I don't know how you do it all.
God's grace, I'm telling you. It doesn't feel like I do it all.
Yeah.
I think, over the years, it's just been a journey of growth.
Yeah.
And just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah.
I guess, yes, when you look back and you think, oh my goodness, it's over 25 years that I've been in this space. I don't know how sometimes, but it's felt like me doing life, just like everyone else,
Sure.
making mistakes, growing, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. 25 years, you said, over 25 years. You
Yeah.
don't look a day over 21 yourself.
I'm sure my big brother was like, you better flatter my sister.
Never that. We are as authentic as we can be on this podcast.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I do appreciate it. I think, it's not an easy space to play in. And I think it's not always kind to female talent. But it's just one of those things that if you're chosen for it, and if you keep choosing it for yourself, because that's the other thing.
Sure.
I don't think I've always wanted to be here. But it always felt like there must be a reason why it started. And I want to honor the journey. And if it ends, that's okay too. I think I was never like panicking about staying, which is also why when I decided on what I wanted to study, I studied something. It's adjacent to the industry, but not directly. I studied corporate communications because I always had an idea that, yes, I'm interested in the media space, but not necessarily being in front of the camera forever,
Yeah.
So I just always wanted to keep myself and my options open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a refreshing take, hey? That's a refreshing take in terms of it really stood out when you said, you've always, I guess you flowed with the journey and you haven't always wanted to be here. So I'm curious, I guess, as you take us back
Yes.
and how you've then evolved to who you are today and the things that you do today. When you started, how old were you? Because I remember as a young girl, we used to watch you on Soul Buddyz. I used to look forward to an episode of Soul Buddyz. So I just want to understand a bit more about where it started, and then we'll also dig deeper into, those moments where you felt like you don't want necessarily to be in the industry. Yeah.
I think, when you start as a child, it almost feels like the decision is made for you. And this felt like that, right? My mom saw that we were always, my siblings and I, interested in TV.
Yeah.
You know how our parents are always complaining, little TV, because that was entertainment for us. We'd watch the kiddies shows, and then we'd play in the streets and come back, and then TV is on again. So for her, it seemed like the kids that we were watching, we had an interest to be like them. Okay. And then she also had this preoccupation with keeping us out of the streets, so to speak. We would go off on our bicycles and disappear for hours on end. So when it was school holidays, she was like, let me try and keep these ones busy. So she saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a kids agency starting in Madrid, because that's where we were living, well, close to Madrid anyway. Grew up in Olifantsfontein. And we joined this agency.
Yeah.
My siblings and I, older sister, younger brother. And Soul Buddyz happened to be the second audition we attended. The funny thing, though, is they had requested my brother to come.
Yeah.
They were looking for a young boy character called Sia. And so I had obviously prepped him for this audition.
Yeah.
I was that girl. I always had an interest in controlling the things and not necessarily being center stage.
Yes.
My sister was into pageants. I was the one who would prep her for questions. When they ask you this, you must say this.
Yeah.
So I think my interest was, yes, to be in the industry, but the behind the scenes actually fascinated me more.
Wow.
And of the three of us, I was the more reserved, shy one, very self-conscious. So I always thought, yeah, the kids look like they're having fun, and I think I could do that, but I don't know, don't they get nervous? So I was always in the back of my head thinking, I don't know if I want to be in front of the camera, but I am fascinated about the people telling the people to say stuff.
Yeah.
So my brother's audition happens. I'm sitting in the reception. I'd filled in the form for him. He was still young, so he didn't know parents' information, etc. And then the director comes out after his audition and he's like, next. I was like, oh, no, I'm not here to audition. I'm just here for my brother. And then he was like, you know what? Just try.
Whoa.
Come back with your brother. So Simon had to come back in with me. We did the scene the way we had rehearsed it at home, and then we left.
Yeah.
And I remember when my parents got the call that I had a call back, my mom kept saying, no, I think you're mistaken, Simon. And they were like, no, we want to see his sister. But she didn't even fill in the information. We got the info from Simon's form, but we remember that they're brother and sister.
Yeah.
And then my mom is like, Hunt, did you? I was like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. I auditioned, I forgot, etc.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. What ended up happening is they liked the authenticity of the audition.
Yes.
I guess it was because I was so comfortable. I was doing it with my real brother.
Yeah.
And they ended up changing the storyline because they wanted a Zulu girl, which is why I wasn't requested because I didn't speak Zulu.
Yeah.
But they changed it that I grew up with my Betty grandmother and father's side, the Zulu side was Sia, and we were both now moving to Joburg, kind of thing. So that's what happened with Soul Buddyz.
What?
And after that, the jobs kept coming because we were still part of this agency.
Yeah.
I think 2 auditions later, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And my life changed because then it was TV every day.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you were how old at this point? With
14. Yeah, both happened in the same year.
Oh, okay.
We filmed Soul Buddyz. I was 14. Just started high school. It was crazy because you're out of school for so long and so many months. And it was the balancing of home life, school life, set life. And I think I was still fine with it until the show went on air. And then we couldn't go anywhere without people. Zandi. It changed our lives completely.
Yeah.
I don't think
that you were not even going to do.
The fame part of it, no one prepared me for that.
And I mean, how was it? I hear you saying that everywhere you went, everybody was like Zandi. I can imagine you're only 14. You've just started high school. What did that do to you? Just, that adjustment, especially because it happened so quickly.
I won't lie. I think, if anything, it made me go in more. So I think I became more shy. It was a lot. There was a time I remember we were on the beach with my family. I think that's when they also realized, oh boy, this is happening. We in KZN, we were in Durban on the beach. No, PE. We were in PE.
Yeah.
And I just remember we're in the water and then I turned around and I'm walking with my sister and we're talking and then somebody was like, Chini, Uzandi. And then everyone looked and we were mobbed. I just remember my dad pulling me out of crowds and everyone was just so excited.
Yeah.
It was just crazy. Look, at that time, we didn't have camera phones. Yeah. But it was, people wanted me to sign their arms and my family was just like,
what is happening?
This girl is famous.
Yeah.
And what does this mean? My dad is worried about boys and safety and all of these crazy things. Yeah. And I think it was the conversations that we had, my mom specifically, her whole thing was, this can't change how we raise our child and our children. So their thing was to just make sure that I understand that, yes, cool, you have this interesting job that everyone is aware of. But here at home, you're just Salamina, you're saying you're one of the children. Your money is not a factor in our house. That was, different also getting used to, because you know how we are as teenagers. It's like my friends are buying these fancy shoes. I have money. And my parents were like, nope.
Not happening.
Keep your money, sister. In here, you are not a breadwinner.
I like that.
Here you are a child, just like the other siblings. They always wanted to make sure that there was no difference financially between me and my siblings. And I think that helped me to be grounded. It almost felt like there was life out there and then life at home. And I'm glad they did that, because I've carried that throughout my journey in the industry, so that the fame doesn't consume you. Because I think it can be very, very toxic.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I can imagine as a young girl at the time, it's your teenage years, were easily impressionable as well. Hormones are also doing their thing, or they don't understand me. And I'm so glad, and big ups to your parents for having created that environment at home, so that, to ensure that you're grounded. I think, everything begins at home.
True.
So it was very important that they are very intentional about that. And I guess it reflects, looking at you like over the years, I don't remember a time just in the media reading anything, I don't remember at least, negative about you, or there's never really any negative kind of thing that's going to trend around you. In fact, we look up to you a lot because we look at your marriage with Hausa to Hausa, and we're like, wow, this is so refreshing, seeing this very authentic human who is so talented. And speaking about you specifically, I know I made reference to Hausa in the chat as well, but it's really refreshing to see that's where it started, with the roots, with the parents. Sure.
I think, there was one of the first conversations that I had with somebody who was very, very famous.
Yeah.
Lillian Dube.
Yeah.
And, she, whenever we would be, when you're shooting on set, it's like they pick us up from our houses, and then we spend a lot of time on the roads together as the people acting. And her thing was always, she said to me, don't let fame be the flame that burns you out.
Ooh.
And I was like, I never forgot that. Because her whole thing was, we're just human. We're normal people. And the more people accept us as normal, then they also make room for our mistakes.
Yeah.
They make room for it's like sometimes I have bad months financially.
Yeah.
I remember for the longest time in the industry, I was taking taxis. And that wasn't a thing for me, because for me it was just like, get transport.
Yes.
I don't have a car. I'm like 19, 18. I was traveling from Ollie's. I was taking like 3 taxis to get to Red Pepper to shoot Crazy. And then I was jumping on another taxi, rushing to university. And people would see me and they'd be like, oh, batongi dutse salami. I'd be like, hey, girl, I'm also going to work. Where are you going, And I think I was also I think there's a lot of pressure that the industry puts on you. But sometimes we are putting that pressure on ourselves. Sure. And I've never wanted that pressure. I was always like, even me, I have bad months, just like everyone else. And I always try and educate people about the industry as well. Because the reason that a lot of us in the media and entertainment space burn out or live beyond our means is because we're trying to like, batu ring. It's a lot of pressure. There's enough pressure that we have. In small ways, I just want to take that pressure off myself.
Sure.
So it's really important just to remind people, hey guys, yes, my job puts me really in front of people and in this big playground. But at the end of the day, if you just engage with me normally, you'll realize I have, the same fears, insecurities, goals, ambitions as everyone else, and that's how I've decided to walk my journey. And even in the conversations that I've had to have with my husband, Hausa, in raising our children, now as both of us are in the entertainment space, Barna, what are the conversations we're having with them? I remember, one of the first time our eldest realized, I think my parents are famous. Because at first she'd always be like, is that your friend, mommy? Is that your friend, daddy? And then she was just like, why does everyone know you? How many friends do you people have? And because she was young, she also couldn't always watch the things we were doing.
Yes.
Because it was confusing. I remember one of the episodes in one of the soapies that her dad was in.
Yeah.
He was, in relationship with another woman. And she'd be like, Mommy, is this my stepmom? I'm like, no, none of that. That's daddy's friend, and they work together,
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, I think we can talk all day about just the small little nuances that make our lives difficult.
Yeah.
But the important thing for us is also just to keep honest, authentic communication and try in whichever space that we're in to just show up as our real selves. I think that's important. Yeah.
Sure. I never thought about that. Like the fact that both of you being in the industry, what does it mean for the children? And having to make sure that I guess you cultivate that environment at home where it's your safe space.
Yeah.
Because out there, everyone I'm sure wants a piece of you. And speaking of that, how has it been, being in the industry and forming relationships or authentic relationships with people? Have you found that, because I can only imagine, I mean, having all this fame from a young age, you might be or have encountered people that want to be associated with you because you're Salamina. Have you struggled with that aspect in terms of your personal relationships?
Yes and no, maybe. I think because I still have the same friends I had in high school.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love traveling with people who've known you before the fame, after the fame, during the fame, whatever.
Yeah.
It's more about like we've grown up together, and they know my fears. They understand me. I don't have to explain myself. I think it's really exhausting being in this space if you always have to feel like you must be switched on.
Sure.
Because there is a level of that when you're in public. It's like, this is a silly example, but I laugh really loud. But I've had to have a public laugh.
Really?
Yes, because my dad always used to be
is that the public one?
Yes, that's the public one. That's my tame laugh.
Yeah.
Also don't want to blow out your mic. But it's just small things. Like my dad always used to say, "But one at the back of your teeth," because he became so aware of everyone is always watching us. And then you walk around with that. So I like to be with people who understand, this lady, when she laughs.
Yeah.
This
From the belly.
From the belly, right? But I think it also it keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
And I think it just lets you have places where it's not stressful to be in these encounters. But to answer your question, I think over the years, like I did Top Billing, I did Crazy, where I met all these musicians. Then I was on backstage. Then I was acting with very famous people. Then, and over the years, you realize I've sort of met everyone, but I don't have friends in the industry, so to speak.
Okay.
I think I have, like Stefina, for example, who's my business partner. We met when we were both on Crazy, but that's from high school.
Wow.
And then we did life together, right? So ended up at the same varsity, et cetera, et cetera. And then other people that I meet on set. I guess, some you form really close friendships with, like when I was on Siavendalan, Mimi Nobuhle is still one of my closest friends. It doesn't always happen. I think, yes, for people in our space, we're always thinking, is this for real? Are we using each other for clout?
Eish, yeah.
It wasn't a thing so much when we were younger because we didn't have social media. So it didn't feel as pressured. I think now it's a bit different. I remember being at an event. We were all like lots of famous celebrities were there, we're taking pictures. And then somebody was like, if you're going to post the picture we took together, please don't tag me. I was like, okay.
Okay. Sure.
I won't. And in fact, I won't post the picture. I didn't think it was a thing.
Yeah.
So it's just things like that. There are people who are always, thinking about the fame aspect and who's using me. And I'm not like that. I think it's not a thing for me. But yeah, that's just a choice I made for myself. So yeah, you end up knowing a lot of people, but I think it is important for you, for yourself, to nurture relationships that feel real and friendships. Because guys, we all need friends, especially good friends.
Yeah.
I think life in general, for everyone, it's hard. Sometimes we're both on set. we're both shooting. Harasola Tibana from school. I need to make a call.
Yeah.
So my kids know they've got aunts and uncles who are our friends. And then also very close knit with my family. I think those relationships are super important.
Yeah.
So my brother, my sister, they always show up for us. And I always show up for them, you know. So those are the relationships. I think that support system is so important.
Sure.
And I realized, I think it was a couple of years ago where I realized most of my support system is actually outside of the industry.
Wow.
And I'm at peace with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can't make it on our own, hey?
No, not at all.
We
It takes a
can't.
village.
Absolutely.
Especially once you have children. There's been many occasions where I'm on set and then I see the crèche calling. And then I'm like,
We forgot
we
to.
forgot to pick up the child, you know. Life gets so busy.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, once I started producing, it's like the level of stress.
Yeah.
You know, then it's the aunts and uncles fetching the kids.
Yeah.
The teachers, we make a call and it's like, hey, it's Uncle Mang Mang and Auntie Mang Mang coming to fetch the kids. Or the grannies. Thankfully, both our moms and the grandparents are in Gauteng.
Yeah.
It makes life easier as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thankfully. Sure. I remember actually, how old is your eldest one?
She is now 13.
Okay.
She
so
just started high school this year.
this year. So
Yeah.
she's turning 14.
She's turning 14 this year.
So back then, a few years ago, I think this was when she was still a baby. In fact, I mean, it's not a few years ago. It's many years ago.
Many years.
Because my son, I think they're the same age.
Okay.
And at the time, we used to go to the same church and we would be in the mother's room together. Yes.
Yes.
And I mean, I would just look at you and say, look at her. She's so, I guess, comfortable in her skin. You know, you are this famous person, as we've been talking about the fame. I want to know, so in spaces like that, whether it's in church, public, wherever you are, how do you, because I've always received you as a very warm person, with all this fame, how have you managed to create, I guess, if you're having an intimate moment for yourself or with your family, how do you manage to, I don't want to say block out the public, but almost manage that so that you can protect the time that you're having? So like the example that I'm using, that at church, we used to go to the same church and we were at church, fortunately. I mean, I've seen instances where people are still excited to see a celebrity at church and they actually approach them and the celebrity wasn't very kind to them. How have you managed to, because you can't be nice to everyone all the time. You also have to protect that family space or whatever sacred space you've created for yourself. How do you manage that with the general public?
You know, it's funny that you say you feel like I've always been comfortable in my skin. I actually haven't.
Really?
So this is the thing. I think we walk through life, you know, asking ourselves a lot of questions. So obviously, because of having come into the industry very young, this whole I wonder what people are thinking when they're looking at me thing is always in my head. And I find it can be very overwhelming sometimes. But to answer your question, I think because I learned early on to just, I see the fame, it's here, but I know how to disassociate just so I can just be normal. I think my whole thing with life, and it really did start with my parents. I'm normal, I'm normal, I'm normal, I'm normal, I'm normal. And that is my mantra when I'm out there. And because of that, then I always also just try to have a normal reaction. So there's been times where I've had to say, yo, guys, this child is driving me crazy. Today's not a good day for pictures. Do you mind? I find most times I've had very, very pleasant encounters with people, especially over the years. I think people have gotten used to seeing me. So it doesn't feel crazed anymore.
Okay.
When it started, it felt crazed. But also I realized it's because children and how they respond to celebrities is very different to adults and, you know, in the 20s, 30s. So then it just felt like I'm just talking to people. Yes, every now and then they'll be like, oh, can we take a picture? Yo, guys, get this on. Okay. Okay, you feel tane? And then they'll laugh, But for me, it's always, first and foremost, when I'm out there with the kids, I have to be hyper vigilant. It's about the kids, right? So in church, for example, Dumi was very jajarach. So for me, it was, I'm trying to worship. She's here. I can't have her. There was a day she just took a child's bottle and she started drinking it. I had to apologize to the other mom. This happened in church. And she was just like, no. Then another time, me ubeile beke mo fatshe, and Dumi started taking out her mascara. And we noticed it. I was just like, so it's like the normal kind of mommy worries that everyone else had. I was just like, I don't know if I'm doing this right, and I'm trying to stay prayed up and all of that. So I think for me, life must be normal, especially in the home, but also out the home. And that's how we approach it. Even with Tsepo, we've had instances where when the terrible twos were happening, Dumi threw a tantrum in the restaurant, spilt a milkshake, everyone is looking at us. So obviously we do feel like there's a bit of a spotlight, but I think generally people just looked and then they were just like, hey, children. We all have seen a child throwing a tantrum. I think for me, it's always just like, hey, guys, we're lifing. This is life. There are also a lot of instances where we take holidays, for example, we have to just think, how many people will recognize us? and if we can be like, so you learn to read. Sometimes we walk into a restaurant. If more than 10 people are like, then we know, we're not going to be able to rest nicely. So we might just make a different decision. Choose a quiet restaurant around the corner, sit in the corner, hide a little bit, So these are just normal things. But I will say, I think there is a lot of scrutiny on couples in the entertainment industry, and that's not always easy to navigate. And I think that's also why we're very private people. Home is our sanctuary. And we've also had to have conversations around how we make that fun as well. So that, you look forward to coming home as opposed to, I'd rather be out there, but hey, I'm just going to stay at home kind of thing. So we make it fun for ourselves. We've created a place where it must be peaceful. I think even raising children, you think, how do we talk when we disagree? What does that look like? Those things, I think people don't realize. You have to be deliberate about them so that you're building and creating the kind of space that gives you peace. Then, the danger once you get married is, if home is not fun, if home is not a sanctuary, then you're always looking for that outside of the home. And that really does pull you away from your partner. And that goes for all couples, not just media couples, And we've been very deliberate about creating the kind of space that gives us that. And then in the interim, we realized, actually, this is exactly what we need. Because sometimes when you're out there, it's like, the more people recognize you, then it feels like I'm still working. And we've also had to explain this to our children, because sometimes they're like, but we never go anywhere. And I'm like, mommy and daddy are tired. Festivals and things like that. So we also choose our social encounters carefully, just so that it doesn't feel like we're putting on a show. And sometimes it really does feel like that, because sometimes you just want to not be recognized. And that's not always possible, especially when we're together. I find when I go places alone, sometimes, every now and then people will be like, hi, Salamina, hi, but they leave me alone. That's why, when we were walking in today, I carry a book with me everywhere. Sometimes I just sit in restaurants alone, and people really do leave me alone. Every now and then they'll come and they say hi, and I really don't mind that, because it's nice. We interact. Also, now as a producer, the feedback is important to me as well. You've seen one of my films. Hey, lietsaning hape. Hey, Gietseng. Oh, okay, cool. This is feedback for me. So I don't at all hate interaction with the public. Not at all. I think we're in a medium where the feedback loop is important.
Yeah.
Yes, there will be people who will be mean about it. And I guess it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. And that part, I mean, I guess having to build a very thick skin with the scrutiny that can come from being just in the public.
Yeah, that's the part of the industry that always makes me think, I don't want my children in this industry. Because I think it has really become meaner. And the feedback is more instantaneous.
Yeah.
So that's tricky. But, we're already having conversations. Like, we don't post our children, for example, because I always say, I want them to have their own life.
Yeah.
The people who know, obviously we drop them off at school, we attend things. And then people are like, Khati, you didn't tell us your parents are these people. And my daughter is always like, yeah, mom and dad, okay, cool. But the conversations we have with her, I always say it's not a thing. It's our jobs. I always say to her, I feel like we should be celebrating nurses and doctors much more than celebrities. I mean, really, their jobs are life-saving. In a way, ours are too. All of us are healing people in different ways. But I think for us, it's to impress upon her that she's important, she's shiny, she's special, all on her own, in her own right, without the added thing of, your parents happen to be. So we always say to her, don't wear it. It's not a thing. It's just a job. And what's important for us is for you to have authentic relationships and engagements with people and connections. Make your own friends, make your own connections, without that added thing of this is who she belongs to. I think, that's why we decided that people who see us together will know, but the pictures, the posting, and we just never want that kind of pressure for them until they decide to choose it for themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So are they showing any interest in also wanting to join the industry? Both of them?
Genetics are what they are. We've already seen that they have inklings,
Yeah.
that there's definitely talent there. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I had an audition for like a Disney animation, and it was a big one. And I needed to send in, so with animation, obviously, it's just voice.
Yeah.
That's why I love tone. That's why I said to you, you've got a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
Because I'm always, everywhere I go, I'm always casting people for animation because it needs like a certain tone. Anyway, so I was doing this audition. Daddy was late. My agent was like, no, I need you to send in the tape. So I asked my eldest to read with me. So she was reading off camera, off the tape. And I was, But while she was doing it, I was like, hey, this child is good. So then I popped my agent a message. I said, I don't know if they're casting for the other roles, but I'm hearing something in my daughter's voice. Tell me if you hear it as well. So I made her record the same clip that I was doing, and I sent both. And then my agent called me, and she was like, Salamina, I'm hearing something here. You're not wrong. Because I was like, maybe she just sounds great because she's my child, and I love everything she does. I don't know if this is a thing. Do you know she got the role?
Really?
It was crazy. So now I had to have conversations with Daddy because we had both said these kids are not going to be in the industry. And I was like, oh my gosh, I sent this tape as an experiment. They just called me Disney USA.
Sure.
And I was like, this child, what?
Look at those genes.
So now we had to have the conversations of, what happens when this show launches?
Yeah.
We didn't go to the launch with her because we were like, now the story will be Salamina and Haza's child is also in the industry. So I sent her with my mom and I said, yes, you can say your full name. Because she was like, must I say my surname? Must I not? Am I just Dumi M? I'm like, listen, I don't want to steal this moment from you.
Yeah.
I don't want it to become about anything other than your insane talent. So she went to the thing and somehow, so I had obviously had the conversation with the publicist to be like, please don't mention this so that it's just about the kids and this great new program. But yeah, so our daughter voices one of the characters in Kia and the Kimoja Heroes. It became this massive show.
Sure.
She did her own press. I remember listening to them training her for red carpet. I was just like, yeah, it's happening. I think the wonderful thing about voice is it's not so much about who the people are. Like you hardly see the faces. We celebrate more just what they've done and what they create afterwards. So yeah, somehow it slipped under the radar.
It's in the blood.
It's in the blood.
Sure.
It's in the blood. So, but yeah, I think the conversations we've had with her is about sustainability. I think everyone knows how fickle our industry is, how difficult it is to build wealth in the industry. I don't think we talk about that enough. Everyone sort of understands there's always this thing of, our artists are dying as paupers. It's a real thing, right? It goes down to contracting, it goes down to systems, it goes down to lack of protection, unions, etc., etc. You know, the conversation, it's a whole can of worms. So for us, we're just like, we need her to make different decisions. So if she decides to be in the industry, which we are discouraging, but it will be her journey.
Yeah.
And our conversations are around how do you create other revenue streams for yourself in between jobs? How do you sustain yourself outside of the industry? What sort of other things are you interested in that will feed you and help you build wealth and protections? You know, just in medical insurance is one of the biggest things. How are you going to make sure you have a kitty that is sustainable, that looks after you in that way? So those are the conversations we're having with her, to be like, look, you know, we're surviving, but this is not pretty.
Yeah.
There's also the other part of our industry, and it's worldwide. It's not just in South Africa, but I think South Africa is one of the worst examples of how you really are vulnerable. I think COVID exposed this even more. A lot of artists just still haven't recovered.
Sure.
Because there's just, if no work, no pay. If you're not working, you're not earning.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. There's no show that can afford to be paying us when we're not on set.
Yeah.
You know, so this has really changed even, how we approach the industry as well. And thinking very deliberately around what else. Yeah.
That's so key. And you're right. I don't think there are enough conversations around that. And I'm so glad that, you're being very open with your daughter to say, look, if this is the path that you're going to choose, we've got a lived experience of being in the industry and some of the challenges that we see and building that wealth, as you rightly say. And actually, as I was listening to you, I was just thinking, because I work for a bank, that's my day-to-day job. And I was just thinking, even being able to secure funding, whether it's for a property, I don't know if, because I remember back in the day, a few years ago, I used to be a private banker.
Okay.
So literally, I know the process where you have to just look at the financials. And if you are working on a production, so I suppose in a sense where you're an actress, the production comes to an end, right? And you have to keep auditioning to get your next job and so on. And I can only imagine when the banking industry has to then, or you have to get something from the bank, it's not as easy because they want to make sure that you can sustain that.
Yeah.
So I suppose it requires a lot of being deliberate and planning.
Yeah. I've had to be so good with saving money.
Wow.
But even that is not enough, right? Because so a lot of people will see, we have examples of very wealthy celebrities, but if you actually look at what they're doing, they don't have one job. So for you can build a life with just working at the bank.
Yeah.
In our industry, it's not the same. And the only times that we've been able to get a bond is when we were both on soapies. Because that's the only time you have, at the very least, 8 solid months of getting paid every month. Every other time. What? I remember a couple of years ago, so Backstage had ended and Tsepo and I were moving in together. And his whole thing was always, oh, your TV is so whack. So now we went to one of the big retailers and we were going to buy a TV. And it was, the plasmas had just come in. So it was a little bit expensive, right?
Yeah.
So I was just like, look, we'll do that 6-month situation. Do you know that both of us together didn't qualify to buy a plasma flat screen TV on credit. So we had to buy it cash.
Sure.
So when I have these conversations with people, they're like, huh? Why? But it's because they looked at our income and they were like, you earned here. Yes, we can see it was okay. But then you didn't earn anything for like 3 months. And then, so our credit history is not great as freelancers in this industry. And then, so now we had to be like, oh, okay, so we don't qualify for 6 months to pay off. I think at the time it was like 3.8 was what the TV was.
Yeah.
And both of us had been on soapies. So that's the thing that people don't get about the industry is sometimes I'll earn well on one production.
Yeah.
Right. But then I must now stretch that for like 6, 7 months because I'm out of work. The money runs out, guys. You know?
Yeah.
So that's the ugly side of what we do. Being freelancers is, you know, you have to then learn either to save in a different way or make different purchasing decisions. And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand why or how it can happen that somebody can be in the industry for like 30 years. And then when they are sick, then you see people are saying, oh, let's donate. It happens, guys, because a lot of the time we're sitting 3-4 months out of work and there's no earning. This is why, you know, actors are fighting for royalties and things like that. It also goes to the kind of contracts we're signing, not just as performers, but even the people who hire us. You know, if a producer is going to produce a soapy and they don't own it, the channel then can make more money after they've already paid you.
Okay.
But you're not earning again.
Sure.
So it's not just that the actors, it's also the producer. So it's the whole industry that almost needs an overhaul. I think South Africa as an industry, we compare ourselves a lot to Hollywood, but we're nothing like Hollywood because they get residuals. Like I'll give you an example. I was explaining this to Dumi actually.
Yeah.
Raven Simone and I started in the industry at the same time. And I was watching an interview where she was talking about how she hasn't, and it was during COVID, she said she hadn't started spending the residual money that she has from Raven Simone. And I was like, okay. So the only other comparison to how big that show was is Soul Buddyz, right?
Yeah.
And I look at myself and the other actors who were on Soul Buddyz from when we were 14. Most have left the industry. I'm still in the industry. Where are my residuals? Crickets, right?
Yeah.
And that's the industry, you see. That's not I have been irresponsible with my money.
Yeah.
That's the industry. There's no system, there's no pipeline, there's no collection agencies, there's lawyers and legal and. And the other flip side of it is it's also a travesty because we pay 25% tax. That's how much they tax us.
Sure.
But, I mean, what does it mean? Because that it means nothing to our lives and our livelihoods. You know, so sure, it's extremely tricky to sustain yourself in this industry.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm always talking about, I think one of my biggest regrets is not going into business sooner. I think for the longest time, all of us were comfortable, especially once you get on a soapy.
Yeah.
But then I had the experience of being on a soapy that ended. That had never happened. And do you know that we were only given 1 month's notice? But it was a month's notice that we were working.
Yeah.
So it was the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
Then they called everyone, all of us, crew and cast.
Yeah.
And they were like, so guys, the show is ending. We will all be out of work next month.
Yeah.
But you must finish the show. So we still had to shoot.
Show
so
up.
I can't immediately drop and go and audition and start getting other jobs. You know, people lost houses, guys.
Oh my gosh.
Cast and crew. I remember at the time I already had an investment property. I was living elsewhere, and then I had to move into my investment property. I had to shut everything else down. It was like
Sure.
real life got real lifing. Luckily, I had an investment property, but I'm telling you, for the rest of that year, the pain and headache of trying to keep that, which was all for me, it felt like all I have to show for all these years in the industry is this little apartment. If I lose this, it will be as though I have been irresponsible with money.
The rest of us out here will judge you and say,
Yes.
"Hi, boo, what has she done all this time?"
Yes. Ho neng Salamina le mo TV.
Since
Ntsa dlala
14.
ntsa dlala ka tjhelete.
Yeah.
So that was rough. But it was that moment of realization of, oh my gosh, this thing can end at any time.
Sure.
Which is why I always, when I was deciding what I'm going to study in varsity, I was like, hey, in case I need to pivot and get out of the industry. And when I left the industry, it was actually at a time where our big broadcaster was unable to pay people for 3 months. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I left and I dusted off the CV. I remember I didn't even know how to do a CV, like a professional CV. I called one of my friends. She sat with me. I thought of the skills that I had acquired in the industry. Then I was, on top billing, and I was like, okay, I can, comfortable in unfamiliar settings is what I had gotten out of that.
Yes.
Okay, so we make that a skill. Can communicate well. Okay, so that's what we did, because obviously I had no job, experience in what I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
And luckily, I ended up getting a job in the education sector, but I was an assistant communications manager.
Okay.
And that also just helped me to woosa a bit. It was the first time I had a housing allowance, car allowance. It was like the best time of my life.
Yo, a dream.
Yes. And then also I happened to be pregnant. Then it was maternity leave. I think, 4 months sitting at home, still getting paid. I was mind blown. And my parents were always like, this is what we've always wanted for you, the stability, the security. I think it's just that when you love what you do. So I love the industry. I love the work of the industry. Not always the byproducts of the industry, but the work, being in front of camera, creating new concepts, all of that. That's the stuff that actually drives me. So when you are a creative, it's almost like that is your affliction. It's like an illness. You have to do it. So yes, I really, really enjoyed the security and the stability, because we'd never had it before.
Sure.
But I was bored after a couple of months.
I can imagine.
So then, I remember calling my parents and saying to them, I'm going back to the crazy,
I can't do
crazy
this anymore.
industry. And they were like, no. My dad even said, this is the time I've always been proud of you. This, when you were doing this job. And I said, yes, I know. I felt like I was doing important work, but it wasn't moving quickly enough.
Yeah.
So I said, look, it has taught me something about, the conversations and the decisions we need to make around money. And it just changed, how I think sometimes when money is coming in, it is easy to just think, we live for now. I think that period in my life taught me that we have to always plan. So I've always had a rainy day fund, and, we try, like if we can't afford it, credit card and things like that. No, not a thing.
Nice.
If I can't afford it, cash, paying it off like zzz, and the money leaves your account, then we save for it.
Yeah.
And that's really helped us just to navigate the instability of the industry we play in.
Yeah. And I guess, it touches on your point that you made earlier around when you're talking about not putting yourself under unnecessary pressure because you're in the industry now, we must see you out there, got the Louis Vuitton and the this and the that and this fancy car.
Yeah.
It also helps because I
Yeah.
find that a lot of, and I'll say a lot of young, maybe both young and old people in our country or on the continent as a whole, there's a lot of instant gratification that has taken over and obviously made worse by social media because you're seeing so and so living such and such a life, going to such places, eating such type of food. So I think it's really great your understanding of the industry and how you really need to plan. But that is also being backed up by how you believe in not putting yourself under undue pressure.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. As we wrap up, because we don't have much time left, I want to just hear a bit more about your journey as a producer and also just your business, really, and what's that meant for you in your career.
The reason that Stefina and I even started having conversations around starting a business was when we started talking about legacy. What do we have to show for all the years that we have been in the industry?
Yeah.
It's not just about what we amass. I think it was also just like what have we put out there?
Yeah.
And our thing has always been narrative and understanding that if we're not deliberate about what we want to say about the Black people that we are depicting in our shows and media, etc., for the longest time, that conversation has been driven by people who are not brown-skinned, who don't always understand who we are at our core, the nuances. So we also wanted to step back from the industry and think, wow, we've done 6 feature films. They are out there. That is our perspective. That is, yes, fictitious, but always inspired by real life. When we did Baby Mamas, we were like, every time we think and hear the word, it's from a negative perspective. And so many Black women in South Africa are single moms. And we know and understand these women, their challenges, but they're also like, they're sassy, they're beautiful, they're ambitious, they're responsible, which is, not always seen. They're independent. They're juggling a lot of things, tricky. They have friendships. They attend societies. We wanted to reflect that narrative. And I remember being in New York and an American guy in the audience. We were showing at a festival, and he said, "This is such an unrealistic depiction of Johannesburg and Africa."
Wow.
And we were like,
Said by an American that time.
said, "When was the last time you were in Johannesburg, sir?"
Yeah.
This is norm. These girls are working at the time, our characters all work in call centers. There's 2 Badulang Soweto, there's 2 in the burbs. But this is normal life in Johannesburg. And we said we want to move away from always showing that single story of what Africa is. So that's the reason we do what we do. Amazing. We also want to put out the kind of stuff that we would be proud to watch a couple of years from now. Yes. I think it's really important time for African creatives. Yeah. The world is watching. We can see from the meteoric rise of people like the Tylers, the Burna Boys, Thames and all of that. There's a lot of talent coming from the continent. Yeah. And it's a great time for us to all put stuff out there that is from our perspective. Let's show them who we are from our perspective, Yeah. And that's why for us owning our content, creating, writing, Steph will write, she directs, I produce. So we're building teams. We're bringing other like-minded people with us. One of the people we love to most collaborate with is Sandy from Fabrosans. Yeah. And it's because we love her fashion, the brand she's built. So every movie we've done with her. She is our head of styling and wardrobe. And it's because she herself has a very strong brand identity. Even when we show our products overseas, people are always like, wow, South African women are so beautiful. What are those? What are the clothes? Where do you buy them? And we're like,
Homegrown.
fashion in the continent is a huge thing. And our colors and our textiles, that all needs to be celebrated. So yeah, for us to be in business was also just to have a level of control.
Yeah.
And just find ways to create things that will outlive us.
Yeah.
And that was really important. And when we, whatever project we do, we try and bring something new
Yeah.
and different, or just a new perspective on the same thing that's been done over and over.
Yeah.
And that's been fun. Obviously, entrepreneurship it's actually the hardest thing I've ever done. Oh, it's been, wow, it feels like another child just building a business and then managing all the moving parts. And then also guarding our reputation. I think it's also really tricky moving in a male dominated industry as two females. That brings its own set of challenges. But what we always try and do is to remember that first and foremost, we are friends. And then from that friendship has grown this beautiful business that we've built together. And every time somebody comes in, when we have our freelance crews, we always say to them, you guys are leaving and you'll go on to other productions. But for us, this moment is important and this moment is special. So, if you're going to represent us as Sorel Media, which is like sisters in media. Sorelle, sisters in Italian.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like we always want that feminine touch.
Yeah.
Is our USP. So we want everyone walking away from our productions to feel like, wow, it is really different working for women.
Wow.
And it must be pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. That's incredible. And actually, it inspires me the way you guys are being intentional about it when you were talking about baby mamas and the lens that you wanted to show it from instead of the usual story about baby mamas having drama and because that's the narrative that keeps being repeated. So that's really phenomenal. And I wish you two ladies, greater success.
Thank you.
In your business endeavors. And I look forward to seeing what more you're going to produce. I'm very excited about that because I think from what I've seen so far, really quality pieces of work, which is so refreshing.
Thank you.
So thank you for doing what you do. As you said, I guess we all have our ways of healing and you are healing us through the industry and the work that you do there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ah, man, this has been, I don't know, this hour went by so quickly.
did, right?
I'm like, why don't we have more time? I have so many more questions, but I'm really grateful. Thank you for making the time today to just come and join me in this conversation. As I said to you, the Royal Corner is a space where, it's founded on 4 pillars. And these pillars are, when I listen to your story, I can really hear purpose coming through and passion. The fact that you actually even left that job and said, no, I want to go back home. The industry that found me.
Yes.
Because I think you've been called to do it.
Yeah.
And you're so great at it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
It's a pleasure. Well, folks, thank you so much for making the time to watch this wonderful, wholesome conversation. And we look forward to seeing what Salamina will deliver into the future. Very excited about that. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.